Hello, guys. Welcome to the fourth edition of the Society Against Material Pursuits podcast. It's just me today, your host, Angel Kalchev. Um, and today there's no set topic. It's been a long time, you know. Um, the last podcast, I am checking it up now. Pull it up, Jamie. I am Jamie, of course. Was posted on the 20th of December 2020, which was a whole year ago if you only look at the numbers. Um, but in reality, it's been almost exactly 4 months, I think, which is way too long for something I considered my passion project. I apologize to you, my loyal viewers from Malaysia and the Kingdom of Tonga. It's just a lot of scheduling issues and a lot of other things getting in the way. But I don't think I need to apologize to you because uh, you don't care. Nobody cares about anything. That is not the topic of today's podcast, though. Um, there was actually no topic for today's podcast, but as always, before we begin, the last the last song I listened to was called. One moment, let me pull it up. It was yes, it's this wonderful song by the band Built to Spill. It's called Stab from their, I think, 1994 album, There's Nothing Wrong with Love. To be honest, I haven't listened to much Built to Spill. I haven't listened to that entire album. It's just this song pulled up on my Spotify, not sponsored, algorithm so I can listen to it, and I listened to it, and I really liked it. The lyrics talk about suicide and stuff before eventually deciding that it's not the answer. So it's just the perfect sad but not really song that I like so much. Jokes about Radiohead aside, specifically something about this song that I really really like is how um, the the last lyric spoken is like the singer sings life goes on as a kind of life reassuring message, and then he keeps repeating and on and on and on and on, which really changes the meaning completely. It's the power of words, and perception is something I've been thinking about uh, in the last 4 months since I last recorded myself talking. um, but that's, again, not the topic today. It might resurface. Oh yeah, it will definitely resurface. Today I'll be talking about something I talked in class today. Um, I think that's going to be the main vehicle for my thoughts. We were talking about, because in one of my Bulgarian literature classes, we were talking about socialist realism and whether it's like a good thing or not. That's the debate I want to set forward today. Um, for those of you who don't know or are not acquainted with the like scholarly definition, socialist realism is a literary and art movement in the 20th century, which was um, put into effect by totalitarian socialist regimes, quote unquote communist regimes, to supposedly, quote unquote, be a perfect mirror of the revolutionary aspect of society, which, as a quote in my textbook so eloquently put, no element of literature can be a perfect mirror. But in my opinion, every piece of literature is a perfect mirror. It's just that what we consider a perfect mirror is not necessarily realistic, because every piece of literature carries within it the charge and the way of thinking of the times that it's in, and more specifically of the author, which is, of course, according to Karl Marx, and something I agree with. Every man is a product of his society. To an extent, I'm not disputing genetics. There was this huge um, argument I had with one of my friends last year in philosophy class, which is basically the nature versus nurture argument. And he says nature because you can't dispute genetics, and I say nurture because that's what I've seen um, from my life, is that people imitate when they are young, and when they are no longer young, they don't even know they're imitating, because they're not really imitating. They're just doing what they've always known, and they don't comprehend that it's an imitation of something, which, hey, it's fine. Sometimes, though, I notice that there's this opposite effect, like a child, but I see this happen more in adolescence, and I'm talking about it because it happened with me. It's people, like an adolescent person, like 9, 10, 11 years old, sees the people around them and decides to go the complete opposite way. And with me, I think that was the case. Um, because my brother, ACS alumnus, Kosyu Karchev, his name is in the science building in ACS, no big deal. It is a pretty big deal though. He actually currently studies for a PhD in astrophysics, and I saw that and I was like, I don't want to be my brother, and this is why I am making a podcast about philosophy, and he is studying astrophysics. When he was my age, he was buying up Russian math books with exercises and just solving them. Actually, when he was my age, he was going to international competitions in astrophysics. Well, I guess I could say this podcast is international because it's on the internet. I'm presuming the listener is laughing right now. Oh, that was in the script. I wasn't supposed to read that. Anyways, jokes aside, what we're talking about again? Yes, socialist realism. So, my thesis about this whole thing, whether it's good or bad, is that it's bad. Long story short, it's bad. It's pretty bad. But the picture is more nuanced than simply the declaration of socialist realism is bad, because you can't really just say that, because saying such a broad statement would include disqualifying any of the products of socialist realism, which, while the harmful ones are really harmful, there are also positives, which, again, I'm not defending socialist realism. I mean, I'm defending socialist realism as a literary style, but it's just the mechanics of its implementation don't make the movement worth it. And also, like, there was a lot of things that are very wrong with the style itself. But regardless. So my thesis is twofold, obviously. First of all, is that it's oh god, how did I write this? Is that it's an artificially manufactured part of it's an artificially manufactured style intended to be used only as a vessel of the totalitarian government, right? Um, that's obviously true because everybody knows art has the ability to go a level deeper, because it doesn't just talk about things and let me rephrase, that sounded really clunky. Art has the ability to go beyond what's at face value and influence the deeper part of the human brain, because I can't talk about the soul because the soul is not proven to exist. Well, I can bust open my head right now and see that I have a brain. It impacts the human brain, making neural connections that are stronger, and deeper, uh, in a sense, completely mental, in the psychic realm. Because obviously, when you see a painting and seeing a description of the painting are two very different things. Like if I say a woman painted in warm tones with a mysterious smile, long hair, and yellowish skin on a rustic background, I'll give it 10 seconds to think about what I'm describing. Actually, it was 5. That's the Mona Lisa. And you see, Mona Lisa. Yeah, Da Vinci. Funny joke from 3 months ago, 4 months ago, 5 months ago. Um, but describing the Mona Lisa is nowhere near the same experience as seeing it. And so art is this really powerful vessel for ideas. Now, I had this huge fight, it's not a huge fight, it was a discussion. It's just every discussion in my mind is a huge fight because nobody ever agrees with me, which is half a joke, I'm not sure. With my brother, the aforementioned astrophysicist, about whether art has to have an idea behind it, or whether when you look at literature, you can only look at the way it is written, while not discussing the idea behind it at all, what it's trying to do, while looking at it only at completely face value, like seeing the sentence, the snowy plain stretched out across the gray sky, pummeled by the blizzard. You're like, you can say, yes, pummeled is metaphorical language. The gray sky and the snowy plain creates an image of the environment, yada, yada, yada. That was my brother's thesis, that he could just discuss what literary devices were used. What I said is that you can't remove the idea why it was put there, the feelings created. So, for example, pummeled by the blizzard, that's a very expressive word that creates a certain very strong feeling of violence in the whoever reads this or listens to this. And additionally, the color palette described, like the gray sky, the snowy white, obviously snow is white plain. It's again this cold atmosphere. So there's this cold, violent atmosphere. It's hostile. A hostile atmosphere is created by this image. But like feelings are not proven to exist, unless you count some MRI scans, which I guess you could count. So I guess maybe feelings are proven to exist, but they can't be proven to exist. You can't like show me which neuron a feeling is, right? It's all like nebulous. It's all gobbledygook, as the youngsters would say. Very peculiar youngsters they are. And so art is very efficient at propaganda. That's the second tangent this podcast. And then obviously it's a very useful tool for controlling the masses. And obviously totalitarian countries, governments, because a country can't be totalitarian unless being ruled over by a totalitarian government. 1984, yada yada. I'm not talking about that. A totalitarian government needs to control its people the most it can, right? And art is very useful for this. And Lenin understood that, and at the basis of his massive propaganda campaign during the Russian Civil War in 1918 specifically, I think were those words attributed to him, he mentioned art as one of his centerpieces, right? Obviously it's fabricated, it's fake. Socialist realism is manufactured. It's not a real thing. I mean, of course, it's become real, but it's not like naturally arising from the will of the writers and the people to discover new ways for self-expression. Rather, in practice, when you see it, although its practical application is different from its theoretical basis, which, when you look at socialist realism purely theoretically, I mean, you see something that's pretty ideologically skewed, but it's rather not non-violent, really. Unless, okay, that's the wrong choice of words. I'll explain later because I just thought of an interesting thought. Socialist realism, in theory, is this idea of the revolution as portrayed by society, or society as portraying the revolution. While in practice, in order for it to be instituted by this totalitarian government that it serves, because it serves it, it has to eliminate all other forms of competition, because socialist realism is pretty limited. And as I said, it's manufactured. It comes in from outside, looking in, like somebody up in the government makes these guidelines, or like more like in Bulgaria specifically what happened, because that's all I have the background on. You're a writer and you write something, and it goes in front of a commission of these members of government and the party, capital letters, only the first ones, and they say, this character that you kill in the middle rather looks like Lenin, and this character is the antagonist. So you want to portray Lenin as the antagonist, when in history and in reality Lenin is the protagonist and the hero of the October Revolution, yada yada yada. Your book is burned. We keep one copy for safekeeping. You are banned from writing, and possibly if you try to write again, you are killed. This happened multiple times in multiple dimensions, in multiple applications of this non-freedom of speech, this limitation to freedom of speech. So a rather high-quality author that I like in Bulgaria, Atanas Dauchev. In the pre-war years, before 1945, when the communist regime came into effect in Bulgaria, makes it sound pretty like bureaucratic, but no. October Revolution. We had our own September. It's September. I misspoke. September Revolution, 9th of September. A very, very notorious date for us Bulgarians, but not really notorious outside of Bulgaria. I said Bulgaria many times in this sentence. Now I'm talking about saying Bulgaria. Okay, tangent over. Before that, he wrote some very fine existentialist, very clean, very well written poems, existentialist, and about the self and stuff. After 1945, the government didn't really like what he was doing, because it was a lot about the self. As I said, while obviously a totalitarian government, and especially a communist one, or quote-unquote communist, a socialist one, wanted to obviously talk a lot about the community, about the things around the self, like how the self interacts and how the self binds together to overthrow the chains of the hungry kulaks who want to eat your grandmother and make her bones into fertilizer for their children. That's a vivid metaphor. That's not that outlandish compared to some propaganda. Like, there's a lot of propaganda. And so he basically decided to, save his life by not writing another original line of text, until his death. He went into translation. And believe it or not, even translation was censored, because if you translate something foreign and it turns out to call for some kind of self-actualization outside the borders of this society that we live in, well, not anymore, but some could argue we still do, this socialist, quote-unquote, totalitarian society, then that has to be cut out from translation, or like modified in some way so as to like not perturb the internal balance. And this socialist realism, basically the institution, in practice the implementation of this movement, silenced most other movements until the end, where Bulgaria had its own perestroika, and like things were a bit more liberal. But that's a topic for another time, because that's actual poetic expression. And one could wonder what would have happened if we had, instead of for the last 10 years of communism, we had these things, these pieces of art that we had in the... Sorry, let me rephrase. One has to wonder what would have happened if we had had the abundance of original art created in the last 10 years of socialist rule in Bulgaria for the previous 40. Like, socialist realism was really like this constriction, this complete elimination of individual, not complete, because nothing can ever be perfectly hermetically sealed ideological barrier, right? This is what I'm going to talk about later. Another brief example, the Bulgarian journalist Georgi Markov was a playwright at the beginning of the 50s or 60s, I don't remember correctly. But he wrote some controversial things and he decided to emigrate, and he emigrated to Britain. And he was one of the leading, well, not one of the leading, he was a journalist. He worked for BBC's Radio Free Europe, I think. And he talked about Bulgaria and the situation in Bulgaria and stuff. And the Bulgarian National Agency of National Security killed him when he was in Britain with an umbrella with poison in a foreign country. That is illegal. That is bad. This is akin to what Russia is doing recently with the guy that was in Britain poisoned with the Novichok agent. I don't remember his name, but he's alive. While Georgi Markov died. He couldn't live anymore. He's an ex-journalist. And this is the really dark side of socialist realism. Not to mention when you demand this universal themes from everyone, basically, you obviously get these really lower quality, like you reduce the bar, right? Because you axe the things that go above the bar, and so like there's more to get. So it really ends up leading to some mediocre poetry that's approved massively because it fits the regime like a glove, right? It's just lowering of quality, and any high quality gets stamped out either by force or by the threat of force, even like perceived. Not, it doesn't have to be literal. And however, there's a significant caveat. The state sponsoring art, even if it was like mangled art, led to some good works of art. Brief tangent here. I don't know how brief it's going to be. Brief tangent. Because it's impossible, as I said, to create a perfectly hermetically sealed ideological bubble inside a country and a perfectly hermetically sealed totalitarian society. That's only possible in like 1984. The main thing that happened when people tried to do what they want without the government knowing or without the government stopping them was a corruption, a bribes. Yeah. So that and there was this really, I would say, it's pretty funny when you think about it. The irony is pretty funny. In a totalitarian government supposedly devoted to fostering a sense of community, there was this real fostering of egoism within the ranks of the government and the ruling officials and the entire ruling quote-unquote caste. The class of the nomenclature. That's the term, by the way. And so, because as I said 20 minutes ago, the ruling elite um, knew that art was very important to the continued grip of the totalitarian government on society, and so many writers were part of the nomenclature. And because the nomenclature had this high status in society, they could kind of navigate in the murky waters around the ideological barrier, where like writers that are close to the regime could write on more dangerous topics and be published and be acclaimed because, yeah. And so occasionally these good writers would slip through, like what we're studying right now in this module that I'm spent the last 26 minutes on the dot talking about is Pavel Vezinov's short story, long short story. Yeah, I think that's the term. There's no term in English for povest, but I think the term we studied is long short story. It's pretty long, but it's not like a novel, a real long novel. Um, Barierta, it's called, and I really recommend to the people listening to this to read this. It's going to take you one afternoon at most. It's really, I think, really well written. Even if you can even play spot the socialist cliche in it if you're not taken by the plot. But the plot is not that socialist realism. It's like the skeleton of socialist realism and a bit of the fluff around the bones of socialist realism, but it's not the main plot of it is not socialist realism, I would say. But it came about because the author, Mr. Vezhinov, was close to the regime. He was a well-known writer of scripts, I think. And he was basically a well-known figure of the regime. And so he could maneuver in such a way that the things he writes could be on more dangerous topics and they'd get published. And he could do that. Really recommend reading Barierta. It's really good. I liked it, and I don't usually like it. It's snarky. It's written in this snarky way, like it's really well written. Mechanically, it's really well written, and the narration in it is pretty unique. It's great. It's great. Also, what came out of this government sponsorship of art was basically the golden age of Bulgarian music and film. So some of the greatest Bulgarian movies of all time came out. Basically, the greatest Bulgarian movies of all time came out during socialism. Orchester без име, Хъшове, Дами канят, all of these wonderful, wonderful films. Двойникът, Дърлежите се раждат безбудли. Wonderful movies, wonderful actors, really skilled, really high quality things. Came about due to government sponsoring them. Or who knows? Who knows really what might have happened had the government not sponsored art, had not kept its eye on art so diligently. Maybe we wouldn't have seen them. Maybe we would have seen even better versions of them. Who knows? And so really what I wanted to talk about, this is this interesting thought I thought of, I think exactly 15 minutes ago, was about the difference between, specifically in Bulgaria, because I assume most of the people who listen to the 20 something people that are going to listen to this podcast are all Bulgarian. And so the difference I want to discuss for a little as like the final subtopic of this tangent. Tangent. Come on, I say so many tangents that even the main topic is now a tangent. To what, you ask? To my brain, because it's all tangents. It's all, everybody's brain is like an octopus, and it's got like infinity, like it's, yeah. Cool metaphor aside, nice words. I wanted to talk about the difference between socialist-ish poetry before before 1945 and after 1945. So the so-called September poetry and this socialist realism like literature. So you'll notice a complete difference. So let's check out. I've explained to you actually what socialist realism is. It's this revolutionaryizing of ordinary things and making these ordinary things more, engineering them to serve the party, like a plot, like a piece of like a novel about like a worker that's working in the field and he notices an injustice in the cooperative labor system because the leader of it, the like chairman of the system, is greedy and he takes everybody's wheat to his own house, and so he bands in and creates a union within the union and he overthrows the guy. Come to think of it, this might not have been published in socialist Bulgaria because it's like no, that's bad, because because it's basically this individual manifests society to overthrow a corrupt pseudo people's person, which was, you all know very well, exactly what was happening in socialist Bulgaria. It was these false prophets of socialism just raking in all the profits, and like nobody was there to tell them they're not socialist because they are the socialism. They're like the messengers of socialism. But like it would mostly be historical things about like guy struggles under oppression, takes out the oppressors, lives in socialist utopia. Bam, published, easy. Or it's just saying Lenin is cool. We like Lenin. He is the teacher, the great vozhd. While on the other side, you have this September literature provoked by the September uprising in Bulgaria. Bulgaria, that's a weird way to say it. We have this overtly socialistic literature, but it's different. It's not forced. It came about organically. So, for example, a writer I don't really like because he really like irks me in a very Bolshevik way. He irks me like this is Christos Mirnensky, who very, very socialist. But towards the end of his life, he died very young, 27, I think, 28 years old. He started seeing through these false prophets, so to speak. He has a lot of poems. He has about Bolshevism, not overtly, of course, but like he has a poem called Moscow. He has a poem called The Red Airplanes, Eskadroni, Червените eskadroni. I don't know what that is in English. Like red airplanes, and he talks about the Kremlin a lot, and yada yada yada. And he talks a lot about these social injustices, but like it's not forced. Like nobody's telling him to do it. He was acclaimed within these circles in pre-1945 Bulgaria because he genuinely held these thoughts, and his works are pretty high quality. They are well written technically, like from a lyrical and compositional standpoint, they are well written works. On the other hand, my personal favorites, because they differ from socialist realism pretty significantly, despite both being pretty socialist. It's the works of Nikolai Vovcharov and Guillaume Milef most notoriously wrote September, the poem. It's not a poem in Bulgarian. It would be... No, it's actually a poem, specifically in Bulgarian. An epic poem, because in Bulgarian literature, we have all these things, subgenres we have to differentiate. But I digress. September, the eponymous poem by Guillaume is this really long, gargantuan, grotesque piece about the September Revolution, and I love it so much. In my opinion, it's the best Bulgarian piece of literature ever written, because it embodies what I think literature, poetry specifically, is about, which is every word packed with meaning, and the sequences of words packed with even more meaning. So in general, every word averages to like 1.5 meanings of a word, right? Because of the sequence it's in and the context it's in and the metaphorical language you use it in. That's what I think poetry is. And to top it all off, to garnish with something, it's all intensely emotional, expressional, and descriptive. What I really love about Vovcharov's poetry, on the other hand, it retains this emotionality, but it contains another key aspect of my personal philosophy that I really, really like, is this unquestionable, unanswerable belief, faith in the human as an individual, and then as a society, in the good of humanity. Because Bolshevism, which was the main current of socialism popular at the time, was like, said they had to be this dictatorship intermediate stage so we can reach true equality, because the people can't be governed. Like, they'll devolve back into capitalism if we don't smack them around a little bit. Which, when you postulate it like that, basically begs the question, well, if the people naturally devolve to capitalism, isn't it better to let them? To which Stalin and Lenin say, no. Under the boot they go, in the camps. But Vovcharov has this unshakable faith in humanity and in the individual human, as well as an engineer of humanity. This faith that humanity can do good. He's a humanist. I style myself a humanist as well, because I believe in humanity and in the human all the same. And the main difference is that in socialist realism, this quote-unquote revolution has already happened. We're already living in the paradise of the September poets' world, right? This equitable world. And now we just gotta sit around and describe how good it is and how bad it was and how good it is now. And how this situation is bad. We do something very similar to what has already happened, and now it's good. It's ludicrous. It's funny, because you could see many disillusionments present, like in the very undercurrents of socialist realism, because writers under the totalitarian government, in order to say what they really think, they had to use these really, really long-winded metaphors and like allegorical ways of narrative and speaking and literary devices in order to really say what they think, instead of like saying it more simply. So in order not to get caught in, the spam filter, the free thought filter of the totalitarian government, right? which on one hand, of course, prompts innovation. So when somebody tells you capitalism breeds innovation, you say limited totalitarianism also breeds innovation, because it's this is pretty funny. Um, Capitalism breeds innovation. Yes, funny joke. I understand. Technically, it's right. Um, but a very incompetent totalitarian government also breeds innovation, because, like, if you're dumb, they're gonna catch you. But if you're smart and innovate, you can live like a free man, huh? And the government can't do nothing to catch you, which is a funny thought, really. So to conclude, really, I said really twice, now it's three times. Um, my thoughts on the whole socialist realism, whatnot debate, whether it's good or bad, I'll repeat it. I think it bears repeating. It was bad. It's a limit on freedom of speech. Limits on freedom of speech are always bad. I am a firm believer in freedom of speech. I think Mein Kampf shouldn't be banned. I don't think anything should be banned. But if somebody's ideology proposes killing people, if he acts upon it, he's gonna face the law, or they, or she. I don't discriminate. You can be a Nazi and be any gender you like, or sex, even though sex and gender are different. But that is a very, very spicy debate I'm going to save for when I have some resident experts in the house. Um, God, I'm already imagining the all-star ensemble that I'm going to assemble. Nice word choice. And how I'm just going to be the moderator of a very fierce discussion. But I'm not going to do this to you guys because I don't like American politics, and this debate is very Americanly political. So to summarize, socialist realism is pretty bad because it limited freedom of speech, it limited freedom of expression, and art is such an intensely expressionistic thing that limiting it just, it's like putting like a cork stopper on a raging river. Like, no, it's dumb. So a sufficiently big cork is gonna stop the river, but it's not good. Like, for the dam 200 meters downstream, right? And I think it's really funny and also really enlightening, if I can say the word, even though I don't like the Enlightenment. I think they're just walking around thinking about thinking. How socialist inclined literature changed once a socialist government took over, right? Because one hand, guys are like, we want socialism, give it to us. On the other hand, the guys are like, now what? We got what we wanted, even though it's not the same guys, but you get my meaning. So that's an interesting thought. Anyways, this has been the 4th edition of the Society Against Material Pursuits. A very anti-material episode, you could say. Or a very pro-material episode, because I argue against communism, although, whatever, doesn't matter. This has been the 4th edition of the Society Against Material Pursuits podcast. I've been your host, Angel, and see you next time. Probably very soon, because I need to fill up this podcast, because I like doing it for you guys. So stay listening, stay strong, drive safe. See ya next time.